The meeting will come to order. The members are all present. In addition, we have Brian Baumgartel from the Test Center. We have Adam Turner from the Martha's Vineyard Commission. We're going to have Sherry from the Commission. Steve Layton, former and perhaps future member of the committee. Periodically, like at least once a year, we try to meet up with the Vineyard and exchange notes because all of us are faced with the same kind of problems and doing our experiments and our demonstration projects to try to overcome the problems. And so Adam and Sherry were available, and I thought February is a good month to do something indoors. And so
Here's Sherry now. We used to meet in person, so it's unfortunate that well, I guess with Zoom, it's one of the benefits of COVID that everybody has Zoom and you don't have to, it's easier. We actually do things with Nantucket. But thanks for having us, Eric. Sherry is here.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, well, you've been chasing IAs around in a big way lately. We've been chasing PRBs around in a big way.
Oh, we've done that too.
And you know, we have a shellfish thing going on. We have a number of experiments, but why don't we start with the IAs? I think we all got a hold of the Tisbury Board of Health initiative, and I wonder if you could tell us where the Vineyard is on IAs.
Thank you. We could also talk. We did a PRB in Tisbury as well. Several years ago, with the town of Tisbury, we partnered. Sherry actually did all of the water quality testing for an IA system that had some promise. And you know, in the Vineyard, there are three towns that have some sort of centralized wastewater. Although they're small, and every one of those towns now is pretty much up to the top, and are going to have to maximize or enhance what they've got. So we thought 80% of the Vineyard is without sewer, and they're not going to sewer in the Up Island places, even if we caught some in the Down Island. That, you know, as a commission, Sherry and I felt like we have to test, because we do, but we really need to look for solutions. I mean, we've been waiting, you know, we've tested for 10 years. We know what's going on. And we need to develop something to combat that and to clean it up. And we began talking to Eric and looked for technologies that were, that had some promise. And one of the guys from the Vineyard, John Smith, came to us and in Tisbury and proposed that we help him, you know, with getting his system approved. Showed some promise. So the last 3 years, we've been part of that effort in terms of him putting them in and getting good results. I'm glad the Barnstable officials are here, Barnstable County, because they've seen him even longer than I have. And in the last couple of years have been perfecting this. Well, how does it work when there's nobody living in the house? How does it work when everybody's in the house? Cold weather. So we're trying to perfect this. I will say that the state is very difficult. The state is content that we just go years and years and years without cleaning these. They don't really care. I know they say they'll, but it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that it takes 5 years for any technology without spending quite a bit of money. And these aren't multinational firms doing IA systems. These are small, as somebody said at the last hearing that I saw, in their garage type stuff. So we've been sort of fighting that, looking for, leverage where we can. We're lucky enough to start to put some in on the Cape, because we have to get to 50. We are doing a project. We got money from the state to do an Up Island 208 plan, because there's no sewer district. But our goal is to get this. There are other technologies that are now emerging. We did go to the bond commission, to the Clean Water Fund, which finances wastewater systems, normally sewer, and did get them to approve in concept the financing of IA systems. But it's an IA system that comes in a package that's not there. How do you regulate these? And this is why I'm glad we have the meeting today. How, sewer is in an authority. You can raise money, you can test it, you can do everything through the ratepayers. How do you, if we were going to get funds and other things to put in a lot of these things to clean up water, how do we do it? So I'll stop there. We're getting good results though. The system is between 5 and 8 consistently. That's a significant increase to what we've seen. So we're optimistic, but we still got, seems like a long way to go.
How many have you put in the ground and how long have they been there?
Sherry, well, we put probably 25 in the ground and maybe 3-4 years. Sherry, if
Yeah,
not,
we have about 20 in the ground, and the oldest ones have been in the ground for at least 2 to 3 years. They just finished a couple of them last year. I think they had some issues with rock, so they had to do some placement, but they've been going really well. The
yeah, it's
results are good.
definitely,
It's
definitely
been great that John lives here, because John has been, every time he tweaks it, as soon as he sees any kind of an issue with it, he's there to tweak it. If we notice something when we go out to test it and we say anything to him, he's always there to adjust the system. So
yeah, I call him the sewer whisperer, because if you tell him what's going on, he gets it. It's got to be at least 2 years, because I judge everything BC before COVID. We're started well before COVID, Sherry. So it's got to be at least 3.5 years with the old systems. But we have had a good last year. And again, I think Z Crocker over there put in I think 10. You guys are doing some over there. So, but we're not wet. I think the only thing I want to say is that I think the way we look at it is there's not one magic bullet that we could just take, let's just sewer. Can't do it. So we've got to develop all these technologies. If there are others that get down to that level, the commission passed a very strong regulation. We don't see everything, but we do see a lot where you have to, you can't, basically it's net zero. You don't have to clean it up, but you can't put any more in, roughly. So
When you're talking
we've
to
had we've had several mitigation projects through the commission that they're looking at putting in IA systems in the watershed. So that's been really nice. Rather than monetary mitigation, they've offered to put in other systems.
So in other words, if you have too much for the policy, you retrofit existing septic tanks with a nitro system, or a system that can be at 5 to 8.
But when you're talking to SRF, do they indicate that systems that haven't been approved for general use, like Mr. Smith's, would be fundable?
I doubt it. I mean, we've been, I don't even know the word. We've been really critical of them. Not the revolving fund, but DEP. Both in the way they regulate septic tanks too, is they claim that septic tanks are putting out 26.6. George Hoyfelder said if you ever found one at that level, he would drink it. So he must have felt fairly confident that we would never actually find. And then again, I go to all these meetings, and so well, what are you going to do about it? They don't have a lot of answers. So I would say no. That's a long-winded answer, and I would say no.
Sure, Steve, and then Ken.
Yeah, good. Adam and Sherry, thank you for joining us. I sit on the Board of Health in Falmouth as well as on this committee. So I'm fascinated by the fact that the system's running at 5 to 8, because we keep at the Board of Health pushing people to put IA systems in whenever we can, and we've been trying to ratchet down the performance number with them. A couple of quick questions, big overview type questions. This system compared to the more conventional, I should say conventional, the general use approval IA systems, in terms of cost, is it roughly the same cost, or is it more money?
I think it's actually cheaper. There's no, this system doesn't, this system works. It's, it's always been, using, wood chips and stuff. And how do you manage, putting sewage, septic into that, through that medium with the right air and get it there. So he's figured that out. But there's not a lot of maintenance to this. You have to change the wood chips every now and then, but he's even thinking that, as long as the wood chips remain, anaerobic, and maybe I should bring him here at some point to go over his system with you. It's a little different in that, there's no maintenance. There's not a lot of maintenance. It's about, Sherry, it's about 25 grand. I just got one estimated. So it's about 25,000.
In addition to the septic system, it's about
It works on top of it works next to the septic system. So,
the other thing I'd offer is, a few meetings back, we got an excellent presentation on PowerPoint of all of the impediments to going forward with IAs, basically on what the DEP's sort of attitude is. If you do not have a copy of that, we could readily share it with them. It's really well put together. And it's, anybody that you want to preach to and say, this is what we're up against, please help us. Your state rep or whoever else you want to enlist. It's a pretty cognitive document.
To give you a 2-sentence summary of it, we looked at every system that was installed in Falmouth since 2015. We looked at how they performed, and we concluded that even the ones that were supposed to perform at 50% reduction didn't do it.
Right.
And most of them didn't perform that well. Frankly, the only ones that performed to a level that was going to do us any good were the nitro and the nitrex, and George's what do you call it?
Layer cake.
Layer cake, yeah. But that was it. All the others, including all the ones that have general use approval, were useless for our purposes, because unless they were going to get down below 6 or 8, they weren't going to do the job. You could put every house in the watershed on one of these, and it wouldn't get you to your TNDL. So what's the point? Ken?
Yeah, so, well, Eric, what you just said confirms that I've always been a fan of wood chips. There's something about them. But the weak link, it seems to me, and I've been doing some experiments up at Wareham, is temperature. Either, you don't get enough nitrification because it's too cold, or the rates of denitrification are too slow. So I'm just wondering if in your sampling of these systems, do you see a degradation of performance in the winter, or especially if there's high use, which those two things might not happen much on the vineyard, high use and winter.
Right.
But
right, actually, there's one more thing to that, Ken, is put together the temperature and the fact that in a lot of houses people leave. So you've got, but he seems to have worked that out. At first he was, he's never been greater than 10 to 15. I mean, he's never been really high, but he seems to have worked that out. Again, Sherry may be able to talk, but I've seen some cold weather. I know that was one of his focuses, and I don't think that's a problem with him anymore.
Mm-hmm. And what are when you say they're 8 to 10, what are the inflow concentrations?
50.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right,
at least. A lot of them were even higher.
Yeah.
Right.
We did see in the winter, January, February, they did slow down a little bit. And we have several installations that are seasonal. So we're really interested to see how those are going to respond.
The
We also are
seasonal-
looking at when we have a seasonal unit, how do you turn it on? When
Right.
people come back, you know, what do you have to do to make sure that it begins to function? So.
Mhm.
And those are legitimate questions. It's unfortunate DEP has not asked any of them, other than you need to have 50. That's been my thing, and I would love to see your thing on it. Sometimes I go to these meetings, I'm like the fly in the butter all by myself, you know. But I just think it's crazy that, I mean, the Cape has been, you know, you've been going on 10 years. Are you interested in solving this? Our ponds are getting worse. The climate is getting hotter. We're getting less rain on occasion. We've got to do something. We're getting cyanobacteria now, and you know, it used to be nitrogen doesn't hurt anybody except, you know, algae. Well, now it is hurting people.
So one other thing maybe that I could ask, because, you know, Pio Lombardo proposed, in fact, they installed a system like this, you know, basically years ago, multi-user system, and it got pretty good results, the Nitrex system.
Yep.
The issue that came up was if it's proprietary and, you know, then suddenly it gets more expensive and more more challenging to put it in and all that. Just
Nitrex is no longer proprietary.
no, I understand that, but what about this Nitro E?
Oh, I think it's private. I don't think it ever was proprietary, but he has, you know, his price is you'd have to talk to him. We work with PO. We work with PO too. And PO is just a little bit more expensive, but you know, PO is getting good results on most of his occasions. So that's fantastic.
What have you done with PO? Because we've tried to work with PO.
Yeah. Well, we originally did our PRB analysis when we were going to do a PRB, and then I think we have 2 of his things in the ground, although we don't have anything to do with it. But we, you know, he's been sharing his stuff. We just put in an you know, whatever the Biden ARB, is that what it's called? The ARPA. We just put in a big grant for that to put in 20 or 30 of these things, and PO would be part of that. So we know him.
I was going to ask you. You got $750,000 to put these things in the ground.
No, we got about 350,000.
350.
Yeah, we haven't gotten it yet either. Though.
Oh, I thought the vineyard.
We finished first. We finished first in the. They went through this whole ranking. Well, I think we'll eventually get it, but we also, even if we did get it, we really have to figure out. And that's what I'm saying to you guys. One thing you'd help us is, and women, is that if we get funding, how would we distribute it? And how would we, you know, if you have, we would like to give it to people and sort of set up an enterprise fund, but we have no authority to do it. You know, there's no, they're calling it a CME, a community management entity. That's what EPA is calling it, like a sewer authority, but for IA, but it hasn't worked yet. It hasn't gotten, excuse me for 1 minute. You can talk to Sherry.
Okay. Okay, where'd you go, Sherry?
There she goes.
Yeah, that has been a problem for us. It's like, you know, how do you distribute the money once we get these, or how do we pick people? When the town of Tisbury put in the first 10, they had people kind of enter a lottery, and it wasn't income based. We'd like to, I know we definitely would like to set up some kind of a system that you can get a loan and you attach it to your mortgage. And then after 20 years, I think it just disappears. But if you sell before then you have to pay the loan back and kind of keep that money going. And we've talked to several of the towns. I know Tisbury is looking into it, because it's a big ask to ask somebody, you know, change out their septic system, and sometimes people just can't afford it. When we first started doing this, the cost of the analysis to do the testing, because we were testing every month, that was prohibitive. But now we're testing the John Smith, the nitro systems. We test those quarterly, which we have to go out next week. Now that the snow's gone, we got to get out there before it snows again, so we can find them.
We had a project in West Falmouth. We got an EPA grant and solicited homeowners around the waterfront and said, we'll give you $10,000 if you'll put a system in that and let us monitor it and evaluate it. And that seemed to work.
I think that's what we're going to do. But we have to figure out some way of handing it out and regulating. We're probably going to give it to Board of Health. Although we'd like to make this for low income model and stuff, I think it needs to also be where in the watershed we need it. These ponds have coves and some are very far away from the openings, and they have different levels. It's one of the weaknesses of the MEP is the MEP is one total, but if you go on the left side of the total, it may be next to an inlet that's pretty flushed and it's good. If it's on the other side, it's not. So we're trying to get as much bang for the buck in terms of water quality. This is not really a social justice program.
Most people who live near the water have dough. At least in our town. Steve.
Yeah, the Board of Health, when we approve an IA system, we have standard sets of conditions, and one of them is they have to, register the IA system with their deed, and they have to have it an operations and maintenance contract with somebody, and results have to be reported to the county health authority, and we get the data back. That's from where Eric was able to summarize that things don't work as well as they could. But one of the things that seems to be happening is the need to monitor the things quarterly, measure them, and or maintain them. It's a very limited, very almost non-existent pool of people that will go out and, in addition to sampling, know how to adjust or, ramp the system up or down. It sounds like you're doing the bulk of the work, Sherry, in terms of gathering the samples and everything, but is there an entity or are there individuals on the island that know how to run these systems and want to run them? And, do people have an operation and maintenance contract that going forward to maintain them and take care of them?
Right now, I do the testing with Town of Tisbury, the wastewater guys. We go out and do the testing just because that was part of our contract when we got the grant, that was our contribution for the commission, was my time to go test these. John has somebody who has several people that do go out and maintain them, but this is definitely, if, once we start ramping up, we've definitely got to get more people trained on it. We've also thought about, in order to keep the cost down for testing, having a town lab that would actually do it. This is something Tisbury actually was looking at, was getting their lab back in service. It's just finding lab techs is hard to do. It's an expensive process. Mm-hmm. Once we train them, they go somewhere else.
Sure. Yeah, I can.
Yeah, a couple interesting things there. I mean, so this seems like a great place to have some crosstown collaboration, right? I mean, we pooled our resources, might make it easier to have some staff in one town or the other responsible.
We've got Brian over here. Is this something the test center could conceivably work its way into?
Hey, thank you. So just for the record, Brian Baumgartel, director of the test center, and George is on here as well, if you hadn't noticed already. This is something that we've been working on for a while now in conjunction with the Cape Cod Commission, and John John's been on the committee that we put together, as is Kristen, on discussing RMEs and how we manage these systems moving forward. Clearly, if you deploy, thousands of them, you need a good way of managing them. And as Adam pointed out, there's a lot of talk about responsible management entities and what that looks like, and what are the functions of those responsible management entities. So, in context of those conversations that we've been having, I've been trying to put together services at the county level to provide to the towns, much like we do with a lot of other of our services. The IA tracking program is another example of a good regional service that the county provides. We have certainly a good level of knowledge and expertise in this particular area, and I'm looking at sources of money and resources that I can start to pull together to assist towns in managing these systems, because it's a big lift. It's a heavy lift, because you're moving a lot of data around, you're moving people around. You've got to make sure that operation and maintenance is happening. You got to make sure that sampling is happening. You got to make sure that repairs are being done in a timely manner. So we are looking at ways that we can help in that regard.
Okay, I have a follow-up if I could, because the issue of maintenance comes up, and I'm just curious as to what breaks on these things.
Well, that's a great question. So we are working on a project with the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, the Shubal Pond project, which I'm sure you're familiar with. We are contracted with EPA to do the operation and maintenance and sampling in that neighborhood. And I've actually, because we're short-staffed right now, I've actually been doing the operation and maintenance on the systems myself. And I can tell you that there's not a whole lot that goes into these, particularly the nitro technology. There's an air pump. You're looking at the things that you're frequently looking at as an operator. It's the sights and smells kind of thing, the smells, as good as they are. Looking at effluent quality, just sort of visually inspecting things. But primarily, as long as the pump is functioning, that's a pretty good indication that the system's going to be working pretty well. And if you have that in conjunction with water flow meter data to know when there's somebody home, and that gives you the opportunity of calculating actual mass loads, I think that puts you in a really good position. And in addition to that, a functioning air blower is something that can easily be monitored remotely. And that's something that's been built into the nitro technology. John has teamed up with I think a professor from one of the West Coast schools, or I can't recall where they are. And they put together a small, inexpensive sensor package that reports the air pressure in the system to a cloud database server that can be watched 24/7. And you can set it up with alarms. So when that blower goes off, that you're going to have to go out and do a service run on that and maybe replace a blower. One of the other good things that the builders of the nitro technology have done is they've really put a lot of effort into making sure that they're only doing as much as they need to do in terms of aeration. A lot of companies really go whole hog on aeration. If you look at like the fast technology, they're using like really large regen blowers that are hugely expensive to run and hugely expensive to replace. The nitro folks have selected much smaller air injection technologies that are much more reliable. They're a lot cheaper to run in terms of power costs, and they're a lot cheaper to replace as well.
I heard you say operation, maintenance, and testing is something you do now.
Yep.
Is that something you clearly would do it for the Cape Cod towns on a contract basis? Could you do it for the Vineyard towns as well?
Oh, I'm sure somebody would love to live over there to do that work. So, but I think, as we're looking at putting together our RME packages and, our service, what I would like to do to set that up is to, have the third-party sampling done by, test center staff, because I think there's a lot of value to doing third-party testing. Right now, in order for a company to work through the Massachusetts approval process, they can do all the sampling themselves and turn that in. And I think you can run into situations where you're getting less than truthful data that's going in for an approval. And I think third-party data can really help some of that. And I also think third-party data can help to advance technologies through the approval process quicker. And that's a discussion that needs to be had with the EP, but I think something that should be looked at, because there's a lot of value to third-party data. In terms of the operation and maintenance, there's already a really good built-in cottage industry of operators out there that are doing these things. There are companies that are doing this, companies like Coastal Engineering, Bennett Environmental, and just to name a couple. And I think they're the best poised to do the operation and maintenance. So what I would do as an RME is actually subcontract with a selection of those operators. Rather than having homeowners contract directly with the operator for that piece of the work, I would say the RME would be better to contract with a subcontracting company to do the operation and maintenance. It gives them a lot more leverage in terms of the compliance, because that's been, I've been doing the IA tracking program for, I don't know, it's been like 14 years that I've been working on this. And that's been one of the biggest weaknesses, is that we don't have any ability to force the operators to do anything. And it really depends on the Board of Health to have the ability, the time to go back and look at the operators that aren't doing very well. So I think if you enter in that economic contract sort of a scenario where you're contracting with those, if you're holding the check over their heads to get the work done, I think you have a much stronger position rather than necessarily having to go the regulatory path. So that would be the 1-2 in terms of monitoring and O&M, would be to have third-party monitoring, but to utilize the existing private industry for the operation and maintenance aspect in a subcontract format.
And Brian, you would just have the homeowner pay you?
Yeah.
And then you would pay the subcontractors? Because I've had some of my subcontractors, the operators, who just don't get paid, and they stop going because they don't get paid.
Right. I think it would be set up much like you do with a sewer district, which is there's an IA fee that each of the owners pays in. The nice thing about doing it that way is you're able to distribute the cost a little bit better, I think, and make it a little bit more equitable. If there's a failure of a component, it's not necessarily just on the homeowner to pay for that themselves. They're just paying in a constant fee, what it might be, comparable to a sewer cost of, maybe $600 to $700 over the course of the year. Try to make those costs comparable and build in some of the the replacement costs, which, if you're on a sewer, you're not paying for individual replacement costs for the most part, unless you have like a grinder pump, or depending on how that's set up. But I think it makes it much more equitable that way. And it also guarantees for the operator that they're going to get paid as long as they're doing the work they're supposed to be doing. And I think that's another important piece of it, is that if the RME is paying the contractor, they have a good sense, I'm going to do this work, I'm going to get paid for it. If I go out there for an emergency visit, I'm still going to get paid for it. And I think that's a really good role for government to play in this whole process.
So how many per day can you visit?
It's going to vary. I myself, when I did 3 of the nitro systems a couple of weeks ago. George and I teamed up on it. George was doing sampling on them while I was doing the operation and maintenance. Really, it was 15 minutes to a half an hour tops on each one. So you could probably easily do 8 to 10 in a day, maybe more if you're as you get more efficient with it. Like I've only done 4 or 5 of this particular technology at this point. So I think as you got more efficient and you were able to group homes together, so you don't have a big travel distance in between, I think 8 to 10 is not an unreasonable number, and you could probably get even more efficiency than that.
Especially if you got economies of scale.
Right.
Whether there's a number of them around.
Yep.
John Waterbury's been down in the weeds on this on our behalf for quite a while here now. And the model he's been heading toward is a municipal model where the homeowner gets a twice a year bill, like it was a sewer bill.
Right.
And it would include all the things you've mentioned, but the town would be, the party that contracts and the party that makes sure it happens. And the DEP would insist on that anyway. They've told us quite clearly they view each one of these little IAs as a municipal sewer plant to be regulated accordingly. In other words, they want the town to be responsible for everything.
Right, and they will be responsible for nothing, which is normally the way that they operate. They give you no money. It's really depressing, man. It's just not. We're looking at if we really wanted to clean it up and we really, Brian talked about, Brian, you didn't talk about your results, but I imagine you're getting the same results as we are, below 10, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten a whole lot of data. We're really just getting underway with the monitoring. We've got 4 systems we're doing the monitoring on right now. There's another 4 coming online in the next few weeks, and then there are, I think, another 7 systems to be installed in the project itself. 2 of the systems are performing exceedingly well. There's one that has an influent of about 50 to 80, and the effluent numbers are well below 10 on those. And then there's another one where the effluent it was coming up on 100. I mean, or the influent was coming up on 100. Might have been 85 on that one. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to recall. So that one was about 85, and I think the effluent result for that one was 3 total nitrogen. So the system can perform exceedingly well. We have had a couple issues with 2 of the systems. One of them has an air leak that I think is leading to incomplete denitrification, or nitrification rather. But that's just a system, despite that, is still removing 60% of the load. And then the 4th system is not occupied right now, so we don't have really good data coming out of that one. But as we continue to add more of these systems online to that project, it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
But let's assume that, and the other thing is, hopefully we can get some sensors. That's, EPA is working on some sensors. It's really never been able to have a nitrogen sensor, but there's a lot of them that really be something somebody could make some money at if we had a reliable one. But let's assume these things work at whatever they work at. If a town said, like Falmouth, that we're tired of messing around for areas that are not going to be sewered, we're going to bond, and we're going to put in 1,000 of them, and we're going to, because that's what I want to do. And say, look, if you show, Brian or somebody else that you can get to these levels, you can partake in the money. But we're not gonna sit there and wait 5 years. We're gonna do this, because nitrogen diversion has got to be a big piece of this. It's got to be, so that's really sort of why I think we need to figure out these methods of having a management entity, because I think that if we're gonna, I think it's, if you're down to 3, that's sewer. But how do we, I don't want to wait. Because the ponds are getting worse, not better. And we have a technique, that we need to look at or begin. So that's where I would like to work with Falmouth. I think that we're going to try to put in the 50, we certainly would be into any grants or anything like that. We've been all over EPA too, and putting no money into these technologies. And getting some money and sharing it with Falmouth, and getting, any of these systems that qualify, over the regulatory hump. And then let's look at putting them in the ground. Eric, you and I have been meeting for 5 years now. Let's do this. That's sort of my thing. But I'm glad Brian was on there talking about the effluent, or whatever it's called, the influent, whatever comes out of that system. So you didn't find any, Brian, that George was going to drink?
It's probably got some viruses in it. So.
Right. Well, the other thing you've been doing and we've been doing is PRBs. We got Matt Charette here, who is our PRB guy. And
Eric, before you move on,
Oh,
can
yeah.
I ask one more question?
Sure.
I hate to monopolize this, but
Well,
I've been getting.
Ken
I've been
is
getting-
the inventor of the PRB. So
No,
he's
I'm
allowed-
not the inventor of PRBs. I've been getting, I used to be on the zoning board, and we have these high density developments, 40Bs. And one of the things the ZBA would try to do is require that they put in some kind of a denitrifying system. And, that would be kind of a cluster system, which might get rid of some of the issues associated with, period, unequal distribution of flows. And the developers, of course, claim that they're too expensive, the monitoring requirements onerous, and, it makes the project uneconomic, which is the key word in 40Bs. If it's uneconomic, you can't do it. Having a way to subsidize the developers, and we can always argue we're helping out with affordable housing at the same time, would be great. So just to put that out there. But, like I say, the zoning administrator is saying to me, the zoning board doesn't think they work. There's this myth, and I think shown they do work, if they're nitro or nitrex.
Well, there's two stories.
we have
There
a
are two
couple.
stories here. Most of them don't work, and a couple of them do. I think that, so nobody's wrong about this. They're just,
We have a couple of them, a couple of 40Bs that are being put in with nitros. He developed nitro. I mean, the backstory of this guy was an Alcoa engineer and was in Saudi developing sewer systems or, wastewater systems. And all of a sudden he realized nitrogen, it got rid of nitrogen too. So he actually built, the first one he ever built was for, a large scale apartment. So he can do it. In the Vineyard, we don't have a lot of them, but we are going to have, let me just, we could talk all day, Ken. The other thing you need to look at is, at what point does it become a community wastewater facility, or whatever that term is, where you really get into a second layer again of DEP red tape, and you have to, do a lot more. That's what seems to limit us, is because we don't want to, our affordable housing, we'd rather have 40B as opposed to spreading it out all over the island, making it a suburb. We don't want that, but we're limited in terms of, but we're starting to test. We have 3 of them right now, 3 large 40B, 80 bedrooms that are being put on this system.
well, Matt, want to move on to the, where we're going with PRBs, because the island's been doing it too.
Sure. So we have a PRB funded by the SNEP program, which I think you do as well. Ours is located here in Falmouth, in East Falmouth, on the corner of Shorewood Drive and Route 28. It's 120 feet long, and it's been in place since July of 2020. So we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the installation of that and the end of our funding at the end of this year. But, the system is operating. We've learned a lot about injection approaches. We're learning about longevity of the injection of the emulsified vegetable oil, the carbon source for the PRB. Unlike many of the other PRB projects, at least that I'm aware of, we have very, very detailed vertical and horizontal resolution on the nitrate concentrations, both up gradient and down gradient of the PRB over the course of well over 2 years. And we've learned a lot about the seasonality of nitrate or nitrogen concentrations coming into the PRB. They're quite variable, and we've learned a lot about the effectiveness of the PRB in the vertical. So many PRBs just look at 1 or 2 depths, but we've found that there's quite a lot of variability in the vertical and the effectiveness of the PRB, and we think that that's related to how the EVO was injected, what the permeability of the soils are in different locations along the PRB. So yeah, we're keen to exchange notes with the PRB that's being led by your group, as well as the couple of others that are happening on the Outer Cape there. And so we're in the process of trying to organize some kind of a get together for the 4 PRBs that are happening on the Cape and exchange information.
Maybe Sherry, you could just give us a thumbnail sketch of your project and where it is.
Ours is similar. We were, very focused on the micrositing. Just with every foot we went down, we took nitrogen samples. We measured how much was there till we got to groundwater. Our site is right on the shore of Lagoon Pond. We picked it because the depth to groundwater was very shallow because we didn't have a lot of money to be injecting too deep. We have found the upgradient wells, we have reduced the nitrogen almost to zero, to negligible. We've had it in the ground. We put it in the ground in November of 20. These years just mixed together. COVID just, I've lost them, sorry. We put them in the ground at November of 2019. So it's been in the ground for over a year now. So and we're still monitoring every month, and we plan to for the next year or so. Or well, actually, I think we're going to do it for another 2 years. But it's been an adventure, and it's definitely, like Matthew said, you really have to find where your definite plume is, how the groundwater's moving. So we did a lot of preliminary work to make sure, but we found that it's really highly effective. We're going to continue. And I think that would be great to get the 4 PRBs together and just kind of put together a do's and don'ts book for whomever's thinking about this. Everybody hears about it and they're like, oh, we should put one of those in. And I'm like, you have to put it in specialized conditions. You've got to have a plume. You've got to have it, where you can get to the groundwater pretty easily. There's some definite things that we have learned, but no, it's been great.
Oh, that leads me to a quick question. So was there a defined plume at the Lagoon Pond location in addition to the depth of groundwater?
There was no actual plume. This is just for residential.
Okay,
So
okay.
there was not like, not off of a wastewater treatment plant or anything. This is just for residential.
How close to the Lagoon Pond are you?
I think DEP really, we had to argue with them about this because I think we were, they wanted us farther away, but I think we are like 80 or 90 feet from the water's edge because they were afraid about breakthrough, and they were afraid that, it would, put out arsenic and contaminate the lagoon with any of the heavy metals. But we've tested for heavy metals also. Matt, I'm not sure if you had to do that for yours, but we've tested for heavy metals, and we're not finding anything that's indicating that it's caused by our PRB.
Yeah, we have been looking at that, and we saw increases in arsenic and phosphate downstream of the PRB, but not until 6 months to a year, I think, after the initial installation. So that's something to bear in mind, that there's a sort of a delayed reaction that may be at work there. We had one well go over the drinking water limit for arsenic by just a little bit, but in subsequent samplings, it's come back down, and this is within 15 feet of the PRB itself. And if you look, down, we're like over 200 feet away from the pond's edge. So it's expected that any mobilized arsenic would be immobilized, if you were to look a little bit further down gradient of the PRB as it recombines with iron and manganese oxides.
Mm-hmm. Comments or questions on that one? Yeah, the meeting Matt's talking about, I think will be really useful because we got 4 different places doing the same thing, or at least in 4 different ways. There's a lot to learn from each other. How do you get along with Pio? What's he do for you? Pio Lombardo?
Pio originally looked at the PRBs with us, and he did some measurements for the nitrogen in groundwater and looked at some different, he did the initial survey. But then when we came around to the installation, he chose not to apply.
Huh.
We were really surprised. We actually called him and we said, "You got this, right?" Well, actually, I know I had sent it to him. He just, I don't know why he didn't want to do it.
So
This is
who-
EVO, right?
Yes.
Yeah, who did it for you since he didn't?
Gosh, I can't. I know we use Terra Systems for the oils. I will have to get that to you. It's
Yeah.
completely escaping me right now. They were great though. The company that came over and did it.
Yeah.
They were really good to work with, and they came in under budget. which
What
was
did we use?
willing.
We used Isotech and Terra Systems. I know that MBC did not use Isotech for the injection, but I can't remember who you did.
Okay. Any more comments or questions on the PRBs? So, well, we've been doing some other things. You want to hear about our shellfish? You want to hear about our retention pond? You want to hear about our bubbler? You want to hear about our vegetation removal from you want to hear about our tea bags?
I'd like to hear about them all, especially the tea bags. That sounds interesting.
Okay, Kristen, you're the tea bag lady.
Oh, okay. So Falmouth has been working part of Green Pond Restoration. There's freshwater pond, mill pond just upstream from it. So we've been piloting different ways to not only restore that freshwater body, but also maintain or increase the nitrogen attenuation potential by that pond. Because right now that pond is completely eutrophic. It is covered in vegetation and it's really quite foul looking. But right now it attenuates about 60% of the nitrogen that comes into it. So we've tried a couple of different things, recommendations that have come through SMAST. In 2020, we were permitted to do macrophyte harvesting. So we had a company come in and harvest the vegetation in the fall, basically to try and remove the plant matter so it couldn't fall down, decay, and recycle nutrients back in. Analysis from that showed that we weren't getting as much nitrogen and phosphorus as the pilot tests thought we would. So that was an expensive endeavor that was kind of cost prohibitive. We also tried in conjunction with that summer 2020 nanobubble aeration in there to try and get some oxygen down localized on the sediments. So we had a nanobubble in there for a couple of months, and we learned that the oxygen demand in that pond was so high that you could not even detect a signal except for right at the output hose of the generator. So that was not effective. So we focused efforts upstream. So how could we start to work on reducing nitrogen inputs upstream? Because Bacchus River comes down, migrates through about 52 acres of cranberry bogs, and then dumps into Mill Pond, and then Mill Pond dumps into Green Pond. So we installed a detention pond up there to basically slow that water down and try and trap some of the phosphorus attached to the particulates. But we also, with SMAST, are working on a modular teabag PRB. So what they're doing, this is a pilot that they did last summer that they want to expand this summer. They basically filled the same bags that we use for oyster aquaculture gear with wood chips, and they had alum in some, and they lined them in the cranberry bog channels to intercept the flow before it hit the detention pond site for Mill Pond, basically to try and remove some of the nitrogen that way. We have not seen the data from that yet. I'm told that they're working on it, but that's one of the initiatives they were doing. I think they had 20 bags out there as their initial pilot. And they hauled them out before the harvest, so they weren't in the cranberry bog owner's way for harvesting. Some low maintenance, just scrubbing the bags, flipping them periodically. But based on the oxygen measurements they were doing, they were definitely seeing highly reduced oxygen levels within the array of bags. So some sort of denitrification going on, but we're really eager to see those results, to see how effective that was, if we can scale it up as a cost-effective means.
You got a question from Mashpee. What is the dominant vegetation in the pond?
We have, what's in there? There's some milfoil in there. There's some, oh, it lost. It's not, the water lilies aren't. It'll come to me. Large leaf, broadleaf macrophytes. Is the primary.
Newfar? Is it Newfar? Not Newfar?
Oh. No, it's gone.
Whatever it is that Ken has behind him.
For Sherry's benefit,
That's
when,
Mash Creek.
when Kristen's talking about Mill Pond flowing to Green Pond, Mill Pond is a freshwater system. But when it leaves Mill Pond, Green Pond is actually an estuary system. So even though it's got the word pond on it, it's a mixture of fresh and salt water.
Yeah, we've been trying a little bit of everything on this water body because it's an important one, and because there's a lot of neighborhood interest in having it smell less and grow less junk in their view.
What other methods have you used in there?
Those are the primary ones that we've tried. Milfoil is what we, water shield is what the predominant plague in that pond is. So we tried the plant harvesting within the pond, the aeration within the pond, because we wanted to try and reduce what was recycling through and boost the sediment so that they would actually denitrify to keep that attenuation potential. Because like I said, it attenuates about 60% of what's coming in. So we don't want to just drop a bomb on it and then have everything shoot down through. But we learned that it really wasn't feasible to try and curb what was being recycled. So now we're trying to see what we can do for the inputs. And that was where the detention pond, which the cranberry bogs did not have one, and that was a recommendation from USDA. It's a best management practice for the bogs. And there happened to be an area that was perfect for it, that was had not been converted to bogs. And then the modular PRB was kind of a bonus technology we decided to try out for this round.
Sherry, I don't know if you're doing anything with shellfish. Are you, as far as the nitrogen reduction shellfish?
Yeah, we are. We're trying for the oysters too. We've got a big aquaculture in Katama. They don't really have as much nitrogen issues there, but Lagoon Pond is now has oysters aquaculture there. So yeah, we're trying to expand that also.
Yeah, Tom Duncan, I think could describe a little bit about what our shellfish scenario is. It's kind of interesting, actually.
Yeah, our economically, we got really slapped around in 2020 because there was no market for the shellfish, but they grew extremely well. And this past year was a tremendous success. And we have a situation where the town owns all the equipment, holds all the permits, and we contract with so far 3 growers that we've carefully vetted. And this past year, each grower has a half-acre plot. And this past year, 1.5 acres of oysters removed the equivalent of 40 of the wastewater output. Excuse me, I should say the nitrogen output of 40 standard Cape Cod houses. And Steve will disagree with me a little bit on this. I've been very conservative in using $20,000 per house as the cost of sewering them. And I definitely agree with Steve that it's at least $25,000 per house. So you're looking at us sequestering the equivalent of $800 to $1 million worth of nitrogen just in an acre and a half of shellfish. And to me, that's a pretty amazing story. I'm not exactly sure right now how we're going to go forward with it. The situation we have set up is the oyster growers pay the town 7 cents per animal only once they're sold. So they don't have, at least initially, a whole lot of skin in the game. And then beyond 280,000, is that the number, Kristen? I think 280,000 oysters, they don't owe the town anything. And these are for animals that are wholesaling for 35 to 45, maybe 50 cents a piece. So it's a very, very sweet deal. We got our first paychecks back this year at around $20,000 per grower per half acre plot. And that's going directly to shellfish propagation in the town. And this year really made it economically and biologically and a bunch of good things. So I'm feeling really good about it right now.
Yeah, that's great. And that's nice that the town has the oversight.
That's, yeah, we spent a lot of time drawing up the contracts and setting up how we were going to request proposals from people. And we did not want to run into a situation where one or more of the growers we had picked suddenly had illness or equipment breakdown or something else that would take them out of the loop. And we wanted to be able to quickly plug in another grower if we had to, although that hasn't been an issue yet.
And once again, we can share with you, I think Kristen has the links. They made 2 actually very nice videos about this project. Very informative. You could run them on your community television fairly easily and bring people up to speed as to what these folks are doing and the benefits to the coastal systems by the oyster farming.
Would you mind if I link to those on our website?
Be our guest.
I think that would be excellent. The more publicity, the better, because like I said, I think we ended up being very, very happy with the way things are going here. And our next big struggle is going to be expand our operations by finding new sites. And it's extraordinarily difficult to site these things because you can't put them in an area where there's already commercial quantities of shellfish. Then there's the issue of what the abutters think, because we're using floating bags at the surface. And some people don't want to see anything in front of their house. And the present setup works so well because it's right alongside Washburn's Island, which is controlled by Webner, the Wicoit Bay Estuarine Research site. So, and they were in on this with us. So we didn't have any negative feedback from abutters, but other parts of town, I think it's going to be a very serious issue.
Yeah, we've run into that a little bit. We were all ready to go, and then some of the abutters were like, I don't want to look at that.
Mhm. Yep.
You know, one thing you're doing that I was sort of intrigued with, eelgrass mapping by drone. Did I read that on your website?
We did do a project on that. We've also got Emma Greenbeach, who runs our shellfish group here. She's always into different things, but we're trying to replant eelgrass. We found that the ones that with the roots, when they wash up, we collect those, and then they replant those, and then we're trying to put those out. We had an area near the bridge that was a really healthy eelgrass bed, so it's a really good site. It got sand from the when they put the drawbridge in. There was just prop wash and it was covered. So we think that would be a really good place to try to reseed. But we're trying to plant eelgrass too. And she's also the one who has done the project with harvesting Phragmites and the nitrogen that's there. So I can send you that report. That was really interesting. That's actually going to be part of our Lagoon Pond watershed management. It's probably going to be year 3, but we're going to look at Phragmites removal for nitrogen mitigation. We do not plant it. We just remove what is already there. And just the study showed that like the optimum time, it's usually July, before the plant is its highest, but it's before it goes to seed. So when you cut it, it doesn't go to seed. And you can do it in June also, and it'll grow back shorter. But June and July is the optimum time. It's just, we need to find the harvester. That's the issue, because getting it with a weed whacker is quite a process.
Yeah, Steve. Hey, Steve.
Hi. Can you tell us something about the eelgrass monitoring via drone? How advantages and disadvantages? Because someone proposed it over here a few years ago, and I think there were difficulties with it, but I don't recall.
It's good for the ground truthing because the drones can fly lower than the planes that the state uses, because we use the aerial surveys from the state, but then you can help ground truth it with the drone. I would have to talk to Chris. She's our GIS coordinator and she's our drone pilot. She was in on most of that project, but I think it went pretty well.
Do you know if the ground truthing showed the state was accurate or not?
The state comes down and does the ground truthing. Some of it's kind of difficult, when you see areas with cover, you can't really tell from the aerials if it's actually eelgrass or if it's just other types of algae. We found in Tajmu, there were a lot of young shoots because they had dredged that inlet, and it was really good quality water right there. And we were finding shoots last year in really shallow water near the inlet. So that was pretty promising and exciting. It's nice to see a healthy eelgrass bed.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is the object of all this. So we're
Big
told.
problem in Tashmu is the boat traffic, I would think.
Tajmu does have a regulation that there's no anchoring in eelgrass, but I don't.
How do you know when you're in there whether you're,
Right.
I've been there in the summer. I guarantee you no one's paying attention to that. Including myself, sorry.
Right. Well, there's enough areas that don't have eelgrass that you'd be safe dropping an anchor. But
It gets pretty busy in there. Cape Hogue put in a DCPC so that there's no anchoring there. So everyone who used to go over in Eggertown now has come to Tajmu, and Tajmu has quite a following already of day trippers from those Falmouth people. That's
I
what they
knew we
blame
were
it
coming
on.
to that. I'm sure it's the Falmouth people. Yeah, okay. Any other comments or questions for the vineyard or from the vineyard to us?
What other remediation efforts have you been doing? You mentioned several of them: the shellfish, the tea bags, the PRB.
We're very close to actually physically starting the widening of the Boards Pond Inlet.
Yes.
That's been in the works for quite a while. If I remember the numbers correctly, we had to get to 17 different agencies, from local Concom all the way up to the Army Corps of Engineers and beyond. But the modeling numbers indicate that widening the inlet from 50 to 90 feet at a cost with new bridge construction and all of around $6 million is going to cut the required reduction of nitrogen to the pond by half. And that to me is a very good return on money, on investment. And like I say, I really, it was gonna start 2 years ago, but I think this year, right? I don't know if anybody else has been following that closely, but I'm thinking this year that's gonna start. So that's another remediation technique where we're playing a whole bunch of different cards in this game and hoping that several of them work real well.
Well, building a sewer system around Little Pond ought to count for some remediation.
Yes,
Yes, and then that one,
indeed.
we're doing a little bit of a follow-up, which is now that the sewering has been accomplished and presumably according to their model, it reduces 88% of the nitrogen that needs to be reduced. We've contracted with SMAS to do a follow-up MEP essentially to look at, give us a baseline before this presumed improvement in nitrogen arrives, because it's still coming through the groundwater. Ken's out there with about more than a dozen spots right along the coast where he can see how the plume is doing and when the nitrogen starts dropping. USGS is doing the same thing. So what we wanted to do is get a sort of take a picture right now, before and after. This is the before. And once these plumes start disappearing, as the premise here is that they will, we want to see what it does to improve the water quality in the pond, or do we have another problem that the sewering hasn't addressed?
Right. Now I have people asking me about contaminants of emerging concern. I'm like, one thing at a time. We're trying.
Yes. Yes, we
And
can't
big
have-
questions about the PFAS too. So they want to look at that in the groundwater too. But
Well,
who did the study for the inlet opening? Did SMAS do that study?
yeah, the people
No,
in
that was John Ramsey's group did the
Right.
modeling.
Right.
I can't, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the company.
Applied Coastal
But
Systems?
anyway, yes, and yeah,
Yeah, the irony is back in 1985, when the channel was first created, the town went to the DEP and all these 17 agencies and said it really should be 90 feet wide. And they came back and said, oh, no, we're only going to let you make it 50 feet wide. So now here we are making it 90 feet wide. Since we were right back then and they were not.
and one secret here, Sherry, is the bridge is going to remain at its present height, which means only canoes and kayaks can get in and out. No powerboat traffic allowed into Bourne's Pond that way. Or
That's
it would be a
great.
difficult.
Yeah, because that'll totally change this dynamic.
Right. Okay, any other comments or questions from the board or from the Vineyard or from Brian? Or from whoever else is lurking out there? Okay, well, if not,
This has been great. Thank you so much for inviting us. I think I'll attend your meetings more regularly.
yeah, well, we can put you on the link list and just send it out regularly.
Thanks.
And we should send you the videos and.
Yeah,
talked
that's what I
about.
was gonna.
Yep, I'll coordinate with Sherry and we'll exchange the documents we both promised.
Yeah, the one about the IAs is sort of shocking at just how useless most of the IAs that they've approved are, and how how useful the two that they haven't approved are, which is unfortunate. But your executive director has it right. DEP wants to build sewers. And that is kind of the beginning and the end of DEP's interest in this subject.
We had a discussion with DEP. It's like, how long does it take? How, could we speed up the process for the nitro system? And they're like, well, things could still go wrong. So it's going to have to, I think we're going to stay with the 5 years. Because we tried to move it a little faster so we could get more systems in the ground. But
And
So is their primary concern the lifetime of wood chips? I mean,
I think George, he's not on the call anymore, but I've gone to several of his presentations, and as long as they stay wet, they last for
so
many
I
years.
just,
I think he's already proven that.
yeah, we also put in our PRB in McCoy in 2005. And we've done experiments where we dug up those wood chips, took them up to Wareham and ran wastewater, up through columns filled with them compared to new wood chips. And, they're not performing quite as well, but they still perform perfectly adequately to remove 10 milligrams of nitrogen in about 20 hours. So, those are 15 years old.
Right.
Okay, we have a question on our panel here. Is there any effort on studying increased wetlands for nitrogen removal on the vineyard? You guys look at wetlands?
Our new coastal planner is Liz Durkee, and she used to be the Town of Oak Bluffs Conservation Commission, and she's definitely looking at salt marshes and the effects of sea level rise on them. And, because I'm sure it's the same in Falmouth, there's just no place for them to retreat, and they're being flooded. We do have a study to monitor the elevations of the salt marshes. And we had an EPA project where they tried to put in core logs and try to extend or protect the salt marshes. That wasn't the one that was in a real high wave energy. It really didn't work. It tore it apart. But so yeah, we are looking at that, and just, the carbon sink, and they're so valuable, but it's
the question we had was whether you were thinking of or experimenting with increasing wetlands for nitrogen removal, like artificial wetlands or something like that.
Right.
We looked at that some time ago and kind of said it was a little too speculative in terms of the gain and the permanency of the effort. But are you doing anything like that?
We are not at this time. We're not.
No.
I think the key problem is, where would you put them?
Right, you'd be taking up water. We can't retreat inland anymore. So we'd have to push it out into the water, and I think we'd probably get feedback, or we'd definitely get feedback on that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you all very much. Next meeting in 2 weeks. If we'll keep you abreast of what agenda
2
items.
weeks is a holiday, Eric.
Oop, what do you know?
It's President's Day.
President's Day. How about 3 weeks? Any holidays in 3 weeks? That would be the 28th. Jordan's okay with it. Ken's okay with it. John's okay with it. Tom's okay with it. Steve's okay with it. Kristen is okay with it. I think we got it. Okay, 4 o'clock. Before we go, we need the minutes of the last meeting. Everybody got a copy? Tom Duncan sees no issues.
No, Tom gave me one correction. We took care of it. I added a unit to something. It's okay.
All right.
Yeah, Kristen and I had a secret pre-meeting meeting and cleaned up the little Easter eggs that she had hidden in the minutes. I uncovered all of them.
One.
All right. So the minutes as amended by Tom, how did we, or did the version you sent around have that fixed?
No,
Oh, okay. Do you want to fix it now, or tell us what it
I
is?
did. Oh, I added a unit on Matt's depth for the PRB. I added the unit of feet. That's all I did. because it just said -8 means sea level. So now,
Everybody understand what she's talking about?
yes.
Yes. And I'll move that the minutes be accepted as amended.
All right then, motion made and seconded.
I second.
Discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Raising your hand, or do we ever do a roll call? Steve?
Never did. That's
I don't know
okay.
if you, I don't think you need to do them on minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Oh,
yeah,
but on
never-
adjournment we do, all right. All right, Matt, where'd Matt go?
Matt left.
think he left.
Matt had to leave early. But
Matt gave up.
for my quick report, anyone who wants to come hang out at the PRB, if you haven't been out to the site, we will be out there freezing our tails off on Wednesday and Friday of this week. You're
Sounds
welcome.
delightful.
Yeah, what
It
time
is
what time is it?
all day on Wednesday. And then Friday is finishing up whatever we don't finish. So Friday would definitely be morning, but Wednesday will be the big all day. So they're from 9:15 on.
Okay, you're all invited.
You're all invited.
Now, will somebody take Matt's job here, and
I'll move adjournment.
Tom moves adjournment.
Eric,
Steve,
under committee reports,
Yes.
can I give a brief update on the Friday
Sorry,
morning?
yes.
working group?
yes, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. So as you all know, there's a working group, and last Friday, we heard from Mr. Churchill regarding what he can do and how fast he can get things done to look at a better look at where potential outfall locations are, some refinement of the West Falmouth location from before, areas down by Nobska, and then some areas going up from like Trunk River towards Mara Vista, I guess. It was very instructive. He had bathymetry at several locations. He had done a lot of background work to explain to us how prevailing currents and velocities shift and change at all these locations over time. And the working group is working towards having enough information to go to town meeting in April to look for some more funding relative to the probably on water geotechnical work that may have to be done for, we're trying to narrow down outfall locations and get much more realistic. I shouldn't say unreal. It wasn't we had an unrealistic number. We had a lot of variables in the outfall pricing. We're looking to do better at this point. Does that about sum it up, Eric?
Yeah,
John?
yeah, that's fair. It's
Fine.
Eric, one more thing before we adjourn.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned that there's, you're gonna be making, you and Kristen, or Kristen is gonna be making presentation to the planning board.
yes, it's essentially the same presentation we spoke of earlier, the what IAs do and don't do for. I know the committee's seen it, and the Vineyard will
Right.
see.
There are a number of skeptics on these boards, and it would be good if they got more educated.
Well, I
as
think
to-
that's probably the purpose of this as much as anything. I mean, they're dealing with a bylaw that was written in 1988, and they haven't really looked at it since. The zones of contribution map was changed 2 years ago, but the bylaw itself is still from 1988. And so anyway, this is just, they asked us to come and tell us a little bit about what we knew about IAs, and that's why we're going.
Right, that's planning, but
Planning.
zoning also needs to be educated, and Noreen mentioned, who's the staff, the administrator, that maybe we ought to have some kind of combined Board of Health,
Yeah.
Planning Board, Zoning Board meeting to talk about the value of IAs.
Yeah, I saw her idea. I think my sense is getting a bunch of people together who know nothing about the subject gets us nowhere. And we should start at least by educating
Well,
the different entities about all of this.
It would equip people, it's a third-party affirmation that when a developer comes in and says, there's no way we can get this to work, maybe that's not right. Which
Sure.
I think it's
Right.
needed.
Well, let's
So,
start.
and, I don't know, Steve, would you guys have insisted on a different kind of system in the auto camp if you could have?
What did they put in?
I don't want to go down this path. The system the auto camp has is a solid system. The issue has been they haven't made the commitment to run it properly. This is back to my earlier comment about, who's going to run the thing, where are the people that can do this? The person who's currently been most involved with running it. I think he wants to make it run, but this is an on-the-job training for this individual. And they had a series of mechanical failures that they could have anticipated and had spare parts sitting there. Every time something broke, they were out of service for months. I'm not going to go too far. In 9 years of being on the board, it's the biggest fine we ever leveled to anybody. That tells you something about how serious the situation is. But it's not the system they got. The system they bought is it's not the nitro system, but I think they were given a 12 limit, and the system they've got can make 12. It should not be a problem. They've got enough product. They just
Yeah, I think
they've got a very short window to make things work. Or they're gonna. The board was very clear to them that if they can't make it work, we will limit how many people can use that next summer.
Right, but it's unfortunately becomes an excuse that gets used by people making new applications not to put them in at all.
Well, you would like to be on the Vineyard, Ken, because the Vineyard Commission has jurisdiction over 40Ds. And can in fact require them to do whatever they want.
Right, except that then they cry that it makes the project uneconomic.
But it doesn't matter, because in the Vineyard Commission has jurisdiction over 40Bs.
Well, the ZBA has jurisdiction over
But
40.
the jurisdiction to impose conditions on them that could make it uneconomic. It's the only place.
How do they get around state law?
They were there first.
Well,
The
bully
Vineyard
for you.
The
Bully.
Vineyard Commission had jurisdiction before 40B. Everybody else has the problem you have.
That seems, I don't know, unconstitutional.
I'm sure some of the 40B developers would agree. Anyway, I missed this part here. Any other report of members and staff? And I apologize.
There's a request coming from Mashpee to speak about shellfish, if you would like.
Here now? Oh, yeah. here we are.
Yes.
At the end of
Okay.
the meeting to speak for, yeah, sure.
Okay,
Sure, why not?
okay. I just promoted.
Why not? Yes.
Okay.
Eric, one quick question. When is the planning board meeting tomorrow night?
7?
Meeting starts at 6:30, but we're probably not on till 7.
Hi, Mashpee.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry, I won't take up too much of your time here. I just wanted to kind of pop in. I noticed there's stuff in the paper last week talking about a possible MOU for Wacoit Bay for nitrogen remediation and stuff. So I just wanted to attend the meeting and just say that we, as the town of Mashpee Department of Natural Resources, we'd love to be part of any discussion moving forward for the outside of Wacoit Bay for any kind of nitrogen remediation. We're working on a lot of the same topics you guys were talking about with the alternative septic systems and various other things for nitrogen and phosphorus remediation. So I just wanted to say that we're fully on board. I'm gonna attend the meetings going forward and stuff like that. And if you would like to hear a little bit more about our efforts from the other side of Wacoyet Bay there and what we're doing to try and curb, nutrient overload, I'd be more than happy to come and kind of talk about various things, various projects we have going on that aren't necessarily just shellfish, but everything as a whole. Since it is a shared water body, I figured
Sure.
might as well work together. So that's all I wanted to say there.
Oh, great.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We did meet with Andrew Gottlieb and your sewer commission, and your topic certainly was part of the conversation, but if you're going to be at the table, that would be terrific.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. We're having these same discussions with Barnstable right now, even kind of before it gets to like the selectmen level and stuff like that. They've come to some of our Shellfish Commission meetings and stuff along those lines. So, if we can figure it out here, I'd love to be part of the conversation. So
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. Well, let's make sure we get him on the agenda sometime then, when appropriate.
all right, thank you.
All right. All right. Any other reports of members and staff and any others who may be lurking out there? I noticed we had 15 people paying attention and only about 8 of them were on the screen. So there were others. All right. Well, hearing none, we have a motion to adjourn and a second. This one does require a roll call vote, I'm told. So all in favor, put their hand up. And oh no, we have to do it by voice, don't we? Steve Rafferty,
Yes,
I'm in favor of adjourning.
Tom Junkin,
I vote to adjourn.
Ken Foreman,
And Foreman, aye.
John Waterbury,
Yes.
Jordan Mora,
Aye.
and Eric Turkington, aye. We are ayes and we are adjourned. Thank you very much. And
Right.
thank you, Sherry, for joining us, and we'll keep it going.
Everyone stay safe.
So far, so good.
All right.